Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regular scheduled meeting for the month of February. If you could all join me in welcoming Reverend Virginia Fryer from the Bow Mills United Methodist Church.
Good evening. I invite you to join with me in the spirit of prayer. May we take in a deep breath and release it out, letting go of what has been, releasing what will be. We come into this place at this time. We give thanks for the dedication and the energy of our city council members, city leaders, and those who have come tonight because of their passion and care for this community and beyond. We ask that your presence would strengthen us, that we would listen with care, that we would speak with truth and respect, and that we would honor one another with the knowledge that each one of us cares deeply about this community, about strengthening this community, and about the future for ourselves, for our children, and for our neighbors, and for the world. We ask that we would continue to be an example for others of leadership, of strength, and compassion. Help us to remember the duty and responsibility to care for all of the residents of this city, for all those who depend on others for daily survival. Help us to remember our responsibility to one another and to the earth. Help us to remember our responsibility for the work that is before us this evening. Bless us with strength, with presence, with compassion and care. We ask you to be with us in this meeting. Amen.
Amen. If you all could join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. You all be seated. And Madam Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Councilor Bouchard. Here. Mayor Boulay.
Here.
Councilor Champlin.
Here.
Councilor Cohen.
Here.
Councilor Grady Sexton. Here. Councilor Hirschlag.
Here.
Councilor Keach.
He's excused.
Councilor Kennison. Here. Councilor Kretovic.
Here.
Councilor Mattson.
Here.
Councilor Nyan.
Present.
Councilor St. Hilaire.
Here.
Councilor Shurtleff.
Here.
Councilor Todd.
Here.
And Councilor Werner.
Here. Good to see everybody. Okay, we have before us the minutes of January 8th, 2018. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made, second, to approve the minutes of January 8th. Any changes, comments? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion for the minutes of January 29th, 2018.
Move approval.
Motion made, second, to approve the minutes. Are there any comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Takes us to our consent agenda. Can I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Excuse me, Your Honor,
Yes.
if you may. I need to recuse myself from number 19.
Okay. 18?
Yes.
And Councilor Nyan recused himself from, declares conflict for number 18. So with that, I would just, it's been noticed that item number 18 was removed from the consent by the manager. The manager's requested to go back on, so nothing has been removed. With that, is everybody clear for the vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The consent agenda is approved. This takes us to our public hearings this evening. Madam Clerk, item 38A, please.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title I General Code, Chapter 14, Morals and Conduct.
Mr. Manager.
Your Honor, members of the council, the proposed change would eliminate the city's regulation of activities on the Lord's Day. These ordinances date back to the 1950s and have not been modified or enforced in decades. As you can see, currently they allow the city council to regulate time, manner, areas of play, games, and sports on the Lord's Day. For example, no play, sports, or games involving physical skill to which admission is charged can start earlier than 1 o'clock on the Lord's Day. So it was really just housekeeping items to remove these ordinances that no longer apply. Glad to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Seeing none, we'll open a public hearing. Anyone wish to testify on this item? Anybody see the movie Footloose? No?
We're catching up.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 38B, please.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title V Administrative Code, Chapter 35, Classification and Compensation Plan, Schedule D of Article 35-2, Class Specification Index for Fleet Body and Maintenance Technician and Welder.
Mr. Manager.
Other members of the council, the auto body technician in the Equipment Service Division is scheduled to retire. Actually has retired when we set this. Due to the changing workload and future demands associated with maintaining the city's vehicle fleet, General Services would like to establish a new position called the Fleet Body and Maintenance Technician and Welder, which is the same labor grade as existing position. And this will allow us, for the terms of succession planning and work and growing service demands, to be able to keep up with the change in needs of the position. We would request that this be approved.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the manager? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wish to testify on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And that takes us to our action phase. Madam Clerk.
First is ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title I General Code, Chapter 14, Morals and Conduct.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? So I can now dance and play baseball on...
After 1 o'clock, or before 1 o'clock, I should.
Okay. Seeing none, ready for the vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion's adopted. Item 40, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title V Administrative Code, Chapter 35, Classification and Compensation Plan, Schedule D of Article 35-2, Class Specification Index for Fleet Body and Maintenance Technician Welder.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion's adopted. For everybody keeping score, we're 7 minutes in, and we've been through 40 items. Okay. Takes us to reports. We're about to slow down. Item 41, Madam Clerk.
Conservation Commission Conservation Open Space Plan Update presented by the Conservation Commission and the Assistant City Planner.
Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. We'll try not to slow you down too much tonight since you're on a roll. My name is Chris Tardif. For those that I haven't met, I'm the current chair of the Concord Conservation Commission. About a year ago, you recognized our former chair, Kit Morgan, for 28 years of service, so I figured I was overdue in stopping by and saying hello, and the report we have to present to you tonight provided a good opportunity to do that. We have 7 members on the commission, a great wealth of experience. I was looking back through, and we have a number of members who have been on the commission for 10 years or more, one over 20. wide range of experience. A couple of us attorneys who maybe don't bring that much to the table, but we are supported by biologists, hydrologists, geologists, and a civil engineer, and fantastic support from city staff. That should not go unnoted. And that longevity is important because I think those of you who've been on the council for a while probably realize that when we bring a project before you or a proposal for conservation for approval, oftentimes that is at the tail end of a very long process. The Haller property acquisition that you approved a few months ago, looking back, was about 10 years in the making from the first contact from the Haller property with an interest in conserving their land, going through the process of looking to see whether it was a good acquisition for the city, and then finding the funding to make sure that whatever city funds were expended from the Conservation Fund were leveraged against grants. So that's a very long process. So when you go through your budget process and see that we have money in the Conservation Fund, there's a reason for that, and we want to make sure when we find a project that we have the means to move forward with it. So tonight we're here to present our Conservation and Open Space Plan update. Since the Conservation Commission was created in 1971, we have been guided by an open space plan. We view these plans as really important to making sure that our decision-making is robust, and we are considering a variety of factors in bringing proposals to you for approval. So this update is an addendum to the open space chapter of the master plan, and it includes a lot of new information that was out there, and we were looking for a way to integrate that in a way that it would be useful to the commission when we're making our decisions. So I'm going to turn it over to Beth. There's some wonderful maps in the report and a storyboard feature, and we wanted to introduce that to you.
Sure. Thanks for having us tonight. I'm Beth Fenstermacher, Assistant City Planner and the staff person for the Conservation Commission. So the Open Space Plan update was about a 6 to 9 month process, depending on what part we were involved in. And the purpose, as Chris said, was sort of to take new information that was available since 2008 and integrate it into a sort of a usable format. So one of the outcomes from this update was a GIS database that we can use when making decisions on purchasing lands or going after easements. And also to have more of a public interface. So this is the story map that will go on our website, and it sort of takes the whole open space plan update and kind of brings you can scroll through, and it starts to bring you through the maps, which take a little bit longer. But it's an interactive tool that the public can use. That usually the maps are a static 2D piece of paper that you get, and these are they can click on the layers, get more information on the ecoregions that we discussed through the report, and as we move through, sub-watersheds. So it sort of helps when you click on it and you have this information as you go through the report. We think it's going to help the public understand a little bit more about the city, all the different components that the Conservation Commission looks at when looking at properties and the importance of preserving open space. So out of this, I won't go through the whole thing, but it should be up on the website within the next week for people to look at. So I think it's a really helpful tool, as well as a tool for the Conservation Commission to use as we move forward. There's, as you go through, not on this version, but the Open Space Plan document itself has several pages of recommendations that the Conservation Commission has just put out there as ideas to study further. We will be updating the full master plan in, I think, the next 5 years or so. And those recommendations, we'll go through them and decide whether additional studies are required, if they're suitable for the city to pursue even further, or if they're just ideas that were put on paper just to give more thought. So we're here for any questions. We don't want to take up too much time, but just want to announce that this update's out there and it's available and it is completed.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Your Honor.
Councilor Cohen?
Thank you very much. Can you tell me how much land is currently under conservation easement and that's owned by the city?
I was supposed to look that up before tonight.
Oh,
I think there's, under conservation easement, well, there's several different definitions of how it's under. Over 600 acres.
I don't know the exact acreage either. So we're failing you in that regard.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot, but I know one of the things that, we hear a lot from people are the number of trails that we have on those open space acres. So we've got about 83 miles of trails right now, and that's, been a huge benefit. I think the most popular new trails are the ones out in the Broken Ground area, the old Whispering Heights area.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just not really a question, a comment. I just want to thank you very much. Obviously, this is a huge report. Did a lot of work. You came in front of the Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee, and we had a discussion, and you came back, took some of our thoughts and suggestions, came back and added those into the report, and I just thought it was very collaborative, and I like the way you approached it, and very happy to see this report, and happy to see how well you guys are working with the city and presenting your vision to the public.
Well, thank you. And, we are certainly willing to do that as I think there's good opportunities in terms of open space and what that brings to the city. And, as you go through this process of economic development, really taking advantage of those resources and promoting those as well. I think they're a big selling point for what is, a wonderful city to live and work in.
Anyone else? I'll just simply say thank you very much. This is really well done. I particularly like the interactive racing technology. We've really tried to strive as a city to make city government much more user-friendly, and this fits in that perfectly, and so thank you very much. Okay. See you else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Thank you very much.
If you'd like to make a motion to simply accept the report, that'd be great.
So moved.
Second. Motion made and second to accept the report. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk, item 42, please.
It's a presentation and advisory report from the Concord Energy and Environment Committee in support of their goal of 100% renewable energy for the city.
So how many people are here for this particular report?
Or more than half.
They know the bean pots on the cemetery.
Could you see?
You know this is a good report when my sister-in-law's here, right?
Okay.
I was just trying to embarrass her. It
She
didn't work.
didn't.
It didn't work.
There we go.
All right, gentlemen, floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and colleagues, I wanted to thank you for this opportunity tonight to present the very strong and good work of our Concord Energy and Environment Committee in terms of our vision for Concord's energy future. What we're simply talking about is what is it that we can do as a community to control our own energy destiny. And as you'll see in the presentation that my colleagues here will give, Zach Jonas and Chuck Willing, who are members of our committee, what you'll see is a very specific vision around what we want to do by 2050, what we're urging the council to adopt goals by 2050. There will be a resolution that'll come to you later in the spring. And then a way to have a stronger relationship between our committee and city staff and administration in terms of driving this process over a long period of time, assuming that this goal and that this road is adopted later this spring. So what I'd like to do now is to turn this over to Chuck Willing.
Thanks, Rob. Yes, I'm Chuck Willing.
And I'm Zach Jonas.
Just to confirm, we appreciate the opportunity to present this proposal to you. And before I start, I wanted to disclose that I'm an attorney at Rath, Young & Pignatelli, and I'm here speaking on behalf of myself and the committee, but not on behalf of my firm or its clients. And my firm represents companies in the energy industry, just to put that on the table. The Concord Energy and Environment Committee's recommendation is as follows. We propose that the City Council adopt a goal of 100% renewable energy for the City of Concord. That would be community-wide and not just municipal government operations. It would cover the electric, thermal energy, and transportation sectors. And we would propose to achieve the electric goal by 2030 and the thermal and transportation goals by 2050. We believe that this proposal not only has environmental benefit, but presents an economic opportunity for the city, as we'll further discuss later. The initial motivation for this proposal is the threat posed by climate change. I won't attempt to catalog all of the effects of climate change that we see around the world. They're too numerous to list. Just to highlight a few that are actually shown on this screen that are more local in nature. Climate change poses a threat to our fall foliage season, to our skiing, to our hunting and fishing, and to our maple sugar industry. In other words, it poses a threat to our tourist economy as well as the rest of our economy, and that's a big threat. Climate change is caused by human greenhouse gas emissions, and primarily those come from the combustion of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. Scientists tell us that to prevent the worst effects of climate change, we need to limit global average temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial temperatures by the year 2100. Right now, we are at 1 degree Celsius temperature rise over pre-industrial times, so the time to act is now.
About 10 years ago.
To limit temperature rise by the end of the century, we need to get off fossil fuels by mid-century. Actual and projected carbon emissions from the year 2000 to the year 2100 are shown in this slide. I want to focus on the red band in this slide, which shows the pathway to reducing carbon emissions to zero by mid-century and thereby achieving the temperature goal. That's the path we want to follow. As you can see, in just a few years from now, the curve starts to bend downwards. So what that means is we need to start reducing emissions significantly and soon. So again, we need to get off fossil fuels by mid-century, and that means getting onto renewable energy. And that's the reason for the 100% renewable energy goal by 2050. There are many forms of renewable energy. They include solar energy, wind power, that includes both onshore and offshore, geothermal, hydropower, biomass, and biogas, and coming soon, I believe, different forms of ocean energy. This picture actually shows a solar project on the rooftop of the Second Start building in Concord, so we have solar here in town already. Renewable energy has the benefit of not having greenhouse gas emissions, except for biomass, which has some, but they're offset by emission reductions elsewhere in the life cycle. We have to admit that renewable energy has drawbacks. In the past, it's been more expensive than conventional forms of energy. Solar and wind are intermittent forms of energy, meaning that they can't deliver firm power, and the grid needs some amount of firm power. As for clean transportation, the main categories are electric vehicles and renewable gas vehicles. EVs have no emissions. They are as clean as the grid that they draw power from. If the grid is generating renewable power, then the EVs are renewable. EVs have had some problems in the past. They're more expensive than conventional vehicles. They can be inconvenient. You have to think about when and where you're able to charge your car before you commence a drive. And there's less, admittedly, consumer choice right now in electric vehicles than there is in regular vehicles. This picture shows a charging station at the Centennial Inn in Concord, so we do have charging stations in town. Before we move on, I want to note that an electric vehicle charging station network is forming in our region. That effort is being led by the state of Massachusetts and other states. And it's increasingly recognized that as more people buy EVs, the presence of charging stations is going to play more of a role in attracting visitors to a particular place. New Hampshire will receive a share of Volkswagen settlement monies coming up in the near future, we hope. A portion of that will go to charging station infrastructure in the state. And it's our hope that Concord will get its share of that money and its share of those charging stations. We're hoping that the city will take that money and also supplement it with its own money to make sure that there's a robust set of charging stations here in town. So renewable energy is growing, clean transportation is growing, and with it, jobs are growing, clean energy jobs. Clean energy jobs are the fastest growing job sector in the U.S. right now. Solar and wind jobs have grown about 20% annually, and that is a 12 times faster rate than jobs have grown in the rest of the economy. Looking forward, analysts have predicted that the fastest growing job in the next decade will be solar installer. After that, wind turbine technician. The point being, investing in renewable energy and clean transportation is going to be a job creator. Relating to that growth, there is a shift in energy costs going on. I would call it a shifting paradigm. Solar and wind power have come down dramatically in costs over the last few years. This chart is from the U.S. Department of Energy's Sunshot program. It's very hard to read, so I'm just going to briefly summarize what it says. It shows 12 vertical bars. The 4 on the left represent residential energy, then commercial energy are the middle 4, and on the right are utility scale solar energy. The cost of renewable energy was 52 cents per kilowatt hour in 2010. That's shown in red. In green, the second bar, 16 cents in 2017. DOE projects that the cost will come down to 10 cents in 2020. That's the next bar. And finally, the yellow bar, the 4th bar in, DOE is projecting that residential solar costs will come down to 5 cents per kilowatt hour in 2030. So that would be a journey from a 52 cent per kilowatt hour source of power to a 5 cent per hour source of kilowatt hour in 20 years. So that's a pretty big decline, actual and projected. That decline coincides also with a decline in the cost of energy storage. Energy storage is being deployed on our electric grid right now. It's a bit behind the deployment of solar and wind projects, but it's coming. The main form of energy storage right now is battery power in the form of lithium-ion batteries. The potential of energy storage, including lithium-ion, is to mitigate the intermittency of renewable energy. There are also other uses for it. It may mitigate the need for some electric transmission projects. It's a new technology. It's coming. Costs are coming down fast. Every indication is that will play a very big role in our energy future. The reduction in costs of storage also impacts the cost of electric vehicles. That cost is coming down radically. The major cost in an electric vehicle is the battery cost. So as the battery costs come down, the cost of the overall vehicle comes down. The prices are declining. There are more consumer choices, and charging stations are proliferating. So every indication is that more people will choose EVs in the future. So what this all means is that renewable energy and clean transportation is pretty soon not going to be more expensive than other forms of energy, not intermittent, and not inconvenient. I want to give a specific example of how this is playing out in the electricity markets right now. Xcel, which is a utility in Colorado, issued an RFP seeking new generation sources to replace coal plants that were coming offline. They received a total of 430 bids to their solicitation, 350 of which involved renewable energy. That is a huge number of bids, even for a big solicitation like this. The Xcel reported on the results, and the results showed very, very low prices from wind and solar power projects. These prices followed a series of new lows that were set over the course of the last year. And this is the new benchmark. At these prices, renewable energy beats fossil fuels. It's cheaper. In fact, some of the bids involved wind and storage and solar and storage, so that the storage component added cost to those particular bids. The new wind and storage projects are cheaper than the operating cost of all coal plants in Colorado. The new solar and storage projects are cheaper than most coal plants in Colorado. This is a huge change that will have repercussions in our energy future. So where are we going? Analysts have taken a look into the future based on the information we have now, and what they are concluding is as follows. Lazard, a respected energy analyst, found that onshore wind and large solar are already competitive with natural gas plants. McKinsey, another analyst, found that renewables beat new fossil fuel plants today and will beat existing fossil fuel plants in 5 to 10 years. Bloomberg found that onshore wind and solar PV are competitive with new gas plants, or will be by 2023, and will undercut existing gas by 2028. Bloomberg also found that electric vehicles are expected to reach cost parity with combustion vehicles by 2025. All of these analysts are seeing the same thing, although they're disagreeing on some of the very specific particulars. But bottom line, we're getting very close to a tipping point in energy and transportation. Meanwhile, a 100% renewable energy movement is growing around the country. Over 50 cities have committed to the goal that we are asking you to commit to. That includes Atlanta, St. Louis, Salt Lake City, San Diego, and closer to home, Hanover, New Hampshire. I just looked today and there are 2 new cities that made the list. The state of Hawaii has committed to 100% renewable energy, I think by 2045, and other states are considering it, among them California and Massachusetts. In New Jersey, the current and new governor campaigned on a promise of 100% renewable energy for his state. And I have every expectation that the legislature will enact that promise into law by the end of this year. Over 100 major companies have committed to 100% renewable energy, and those include tech companies like Facebook and Google, but also more well-established, long-established companies like General Motors and Johnson & Johnson. Nations have committed to 100% renewable energy. That is to act. I think we'd be waiting for a while. It's really up to municipalities to act. Cities, as we've shown, are leading on this. Cities are innovation hubs. Cities can try things. Cities are more nimble than states and federal governments. This kind of change is really going to happen from the bottom up if we're waiting for a global or national framework for us to follow. I don't think that's going to happen. We should also remember that we're important energy consumers. The city itself is a big energy consumer. And obviously all of you represent a larger group of energy consumers. If we speak with one voice and say we want renewable energy, that's going to send a very powerful message into the marketplace. It's going to attract renewable energy to Concord, and it's going to send a signal to utilities of what we want, and I predict that they will respond to that signal. Finally, we should remember who we are. We are the state capital of the first-in-the-nation primary state. As such, we have visibility. If we take this step, it will become known. It will be known in our region and across the country. We are more likely to have others follow us than maybe some other cities and towns are, and we should take advantage of that opportunity. But maybe more to the point, it's in our self-interest to act. We believe in our committee that committing to 100% renewable energy and making that transition represents an economic opportunity. It really means investing in ourselves. And as part of that, we will be creating new jobs. We will be attracting new jobs, which is a big economic benefit. We will give ourselves the benefit of inexpensive in the future and stable energy prices. One price advantage that renewable energy has right now over fossil fuels is that the cost is predictable. There are no fuel costs involved in it. We would not be subject to commodity price swings. And that, as any business would acknowledge, being able to predict your energy prices is a very big benefit. We would gain more local control over our energy sources. We assume and hope that much of this new renewable energy supply would be generated within the city of Concord. If it's generated here, we don't have to worry about how it gets here and any threats or interruptions to how it gets here, whether from natural events or other events. That's a benefit. There is also a benefit to setting a clear direction of where we are going. In our view, we're going to be heading in this direction regardless of whether we set the goal. That it will happen on some time frame. We will transition to renewable energy. But setting the goal sends a signal to the community of where we are going and enables businesses and residents in the community to act in accordance with that goal, and to know what's coming, really. So there's a big benefit, we believe, to setting this goal right now and not waiting to see what happens. We believe that also that setting this goal will set a very positive image for the city. Not that we don't already enjoy a positive image, but it would be beneficial for us to become known as climate and renewable energy leaders, and we would like to take advantage of that opportunity. With fossil fuel emissions come harmful air emissions. If we rid ourselves of those, then we'll be improving our community health, and we'll be reducing our health care costs. And I'm going to conclude my part by saying this isn't, or we don't think of this as a proposal asking the city to sacrifice something. We think that we are proposing to take advantage of an economic opportunity, and we would like the city to embrace that opportunity. And I'm going to turn it over to Zach Jonas.
I think they were clapping for you, Zach.
Oh, great. Thank you all. I wish they all had come out for me, but I don't think that's why they came out tonight, unfortunately. I think they came out much for the same reason that I came out, which is for our city, as a citizen of this city, and for the country, the state, and the world. I do think it's easy to get caught up in the policy discussions. I believe you've been given a white paper, right? Is that true?
Yes, they all have the white paper, and thank you for all that work.
Yes, which Chuck and some of the other members of the committee put together. As you'll see, it's a very large document, and part of the reason that is because energy policy is a very complicated question, and we don't deny that. I actually think there are two major problems that our resolution, which we've also written and will be sharing with you soon, is meant to address. And one of those is that energy policy is very difficult. And the second is that an aspirational goal like this requires the buy-in of the entire community and not just specific stakeholders or the city government. And so our city council resolution is supporting a couple of specific goals. First is that it creates an immediate goal of actually creating a strategic plan, a long-term strategic plan to get to 100% renewable energy by 2050 within the year. So that is the first step. It's probably the most concrete of the steps that we're taking. The second is that it creates the long-term structures to create and carry out operational plans in the coming years, and I'll expand on what that means in a second. It's also right for Concord. It's specific to Concord. It was developed in Concord by people from Concord, and will continue to be so. It also puts, to get into that first question of energy policy being difficult, it puts city staff and energy experts in the driver's seat for the policy of this. So we're not trying to dictate policy to the city. We're trying to work with the city to create policy that actually works for Concord. And to answer the second question about community buy-in, it also creates several new structures to build an inclusive process that generates community buy-in as well. Because again, we actually think that is central to the success of this. So first, I'm going to talk about the structures to carry out the policy that we envision in this process. First is that a reconstituted energy committee will have city staff support in order to guide and manage the process. We've been working diligently over the past, how many months now? Several months, a lot of months. It feels like a long time. But you know, we've been doing this, we've been trying to guide and manage this process up till this point, but as the process expands, we're probably going to need expanded capacity to take on our role, which will be to manage the process, to guide what's happening, and to keep all the different pieces moving in sync. Secondly, a working group of city staff will be put together by the administration, working again with Tom Aspel and with you all, to put together and write that policy within the year, and also going into the future to actually implement policy recommendations and operational plans as we move forward. Obviously, things will change. As Chuck noted in some of his slides, made very clear, energy market is changing very quickly, and we need to be flexible in order to keep abreast of those new developments. But we also need, as Chuck said, to have a clear vision and essentially to use it. We envision this resolution as a metric that the city staff can use to evaluate different choices and lead us towards a better future. The second part and the second challenge that I highlighted is the structures to build community support, which again we think are crucial to this particular initiative. One is a public input process, which the City Environment Committee will take the lead on, which will probably involve meetings in almost all or every ward with residents to talk about this, and also media outreach in cooperation with the city to let residents know that this is happening and get their input on it so that we're making sure the process represents our entire community and, again, not just individual or small groups of stakeholders. There it is, press and media support in conjunction with city staff. I think that's vital. Also, creating a new stakeholders committee. The idea would be a committee that probably meets quarterly, and it will consist of businesses, community groups, low-income housing advocates, folks, you know, again, this not specifically outlined yet, although the idea is to have as broad a group as possible chaired by the chair of the Energy Committee, with the idea of having a more structured forum for repeated feedback in addition to the wide public outreach that we're talking about in the input process. In addition, we're looking to tie folks into this. We want people to be invested in the success of this program, and creating a stakeholders committee with important groups in Concord and the public input process will go a long way towards doing that. And that is all we've got at this time. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Who has questions?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, gentlemen. You know, it is an exciting time with technology, and every time I go on the internet, I see someone holding up a little solar panel saying that prices are dropping dramatically, and, you know, who knows what's going to happen in 5 years from now. So it's an exciting time for all of us. My questions are a little more nuts and bolts about part of the process of what we're trying to achieve. And so one of my basic questions that came out, which I have to say I'm a little bit confused about, is because initially you started off with goals in 50 years, then you switched to policies. And so I just, for myself, I just need more clarity between the two, what we're trying to achieve. Can you help me out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I said, the first thing that this resolution would establish is the overall goal, which is to get the city to 100% renewable energy, and that's very specifically defined as renewable energy, transportation, and heating, and there are specific goals with regards to that. The plan is more flexible in terms of policy because, as I said, I think how we get, you know, who knows what sort of forms of energy or what the technology will look like in 30, 40, you know, in 30 years, right? So what we're trying to do, rather than dictate specific objectives at this point, is we're trying to create a process that will create that outcome. So again, by putting city staff in the position of actually writing a strategic plan that will get us more specifically to those goals, we have, I think, a better chance of a good outcome because they are the experts in the city and will be working in consultation with energy experts. Does that answer your question?
Not really, but that's okay.
I can make a quick comment on that. So this is an aggressive aspirational goal, but any goal to meet that goal, you have to have specific projects to do that, whether it's revisiting the large solar project that we were wanting to do but not able to do for various reasons on the Hall Street wastewater plant. It involves, working to get electric vehicle infrastructure into the city. It involves perhaps looking at our zoning to make sure that there aren't obstacles to solar development either on the residential or commercial side in our community. So these are the really specific guts and aspects that have to be addressed and identified in order to move to this goal. So does that help you a little more?
It does, Your Honor, if I may. So the other thing that was brought up was on page 22, because I did read it.
Excellent.
It's talking about the involvement of city staff and other personnel, and that what's not in there is what the cost would be to the taxpayers to do this. And it almost sounds like we're building a czar department, for an energy czar department, and there will be costs involved in that. And so do you have any idea about what that would entail as far as financing it and the structure itself? I mean, you get in there about staff and personnel. What I see, we got great staff here, there's no question, but potentially it may mean bringing more people on.
Well, we've had some very preliminary discussions with the city manager. I think there's interest and support for finding how we might be able to have some formal city support, but I think it's essential that in order for such a program to succeed, we're going to have a great deal of collaboration and support within the city. And remember, as Chuck had said, even though all the trends seem to be moving in the direction of much better economics, we really need to be collaborating very closely with city staff to make sure that the choices that we make are rational choices for us at the time in terms of our energy use and our energy opportunities. So I think that's something that can be visited at, during the budget process, but I think it's essential to have a more formal link between administration and the volunteer time of our committee members and the many folks I think that will want to get involved across the community in these projects and in this effort.
I promise you, Your Honor, just one more and that's it. What I find intriguing is, so the city buys into the whole process and the policy, and we're going for it. And what I've heard a couple times and stated in here about engaging the rest of the community, the private sector and everything else. How do you do that? I mean, you can say Concord, the city itself, the municipality is taking the lead in this, but what's going to entice the private sector and everybody else to join this? I mean, what are you offering?
They will eventually be enticed by the pricing on this. I think that people will find that they will save money by converting to renewable energy. What we'd be doing is putting it front and center before them, or at least a little bit more front and center than it would be otherwise. I don't expect that the city would take on projects that are uneconomic to the city, and I don't expect that businesses or individuals would take on projects that are uneconomic to them. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't, bring environmental factors into the equation, but by setting a goal like this, which I think would be a very visible goal, we will be motivating actors in the city to make decisions to convert, whether in the near term or the medium term or at some point before the goal.
Thank you.
Councilor Kretovic.
Thanks, Your Honor. I may have a couple thoughts here, like Councilor Cohen. I think that it's important to have a discussion right now with regards to a solar project that's looking to come to our city. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are with regards to, if the council were to accept this, what message does that send to the neighborhood that's maybe not so much in favor of a solar field today? We just heard our Conservation Commission provide a report to us that is an addendum to the master plan and moving forward. And in that, there is very specific language with regards to the agricultural lands. And ironically enough, this solar field is going to touch upon very rich agricultural soil. So I'm curious what your take is that if we were to accept this report, if we were to adopt this policy, does it then send the wrong message to our planning board, which is still deliberating, a neighborhood that is very concerned about what the impact to that solar field would be directly to them, when we haven't had an opportunity to do what you've suggested, which is awesome, to take a broader view and to have a community discussion?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's something we've thought about a lot, because I think that the views of those residents are incredibly important, both to obviously for their own lives and also for the success of a project like this, because we actually do need the whole community to buy in. And part of how we would deal with that is the structures that I talked about. We would actually hope to solicit public feedback on things like that, on specific projects, although more likely on the sort of what it would look like. I think the goal here is to add this, the goal of 100% renewable energy by 2050 to the mix of factors which are, decide the outcome of specific instances like the one you're talking about, rather than to make it the one that is higher than the rest of them. It's to put it into the mix more formally, so that it gets due consideration. And again, as Chuck said, we wouldn't expect people, businesses, or the city to take on projects that were economically deleterious, but we also wouldn't expect the city to take to approve projects that were deleterious for other reasons either. I think it's just that we would want. The point of this is to shine a spotlight on it, to make sure that the city is thinking about it in a really formal way and to elevate it in the conversation.
I would just add, we don't take any position on any particular project. One of our recommendations that was in our white paper was that the planning board, consider adopting a solar ordinance, that would basically set a framework for how these particular kinds of decisions get made going forward. And during the course of developing that ordinance, we can identify areas in the city where we want to see solar projects and areas where we don't want to see solar projects for open space or land use reasons. So that doesn't help us, I guess, with regard to the particular project that's going to be proceeding forward under existing ordinances. But we think it's important for the city to get ahead of these kinds of developments. Whether we adopt this goal or not, more developers will be seeking to build more projects in our city and elsewhere. So let's get ahead of that decision-making process.
One final thought about your question. I don't think it sends the wrong signal. I think this is a laudable and ambitious goal that that many people applaud. But I think, the context of the specific projects in which come forward and with the choices that are made with those, certainly, we need a process for that. But I don't think by setting a general goal that's long-reaching in terms of a time frame, and we don't know what kinds of technologies will exist between now and then, it sends the wrong signal with a specific neighborhood or project in this case.
Councilor Kennison.
Thank you. I see this dovetailing well with the city now looking at our zoning. And that is probably going to take a while to get to, some resolution of that. But I see that as addressing your concern, the zoning issues. But taking into what you're recommending, I think the timing is good. Thank you for your hard work.
Councilor Schlig.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I'm going to, I guess it's more of a statement than a question, but I'll ask you to comment on it afterwards. Anyway, I think my fellow councilor brings up the importance of the committee's work and why adapting this report is so important. I think the coordination between all parties and having zoning that encourages renewable energy while protecting our current use and neighborhoods, and having city policies and ordinances which allow the implementation and the expansion of renewable energy is important to the city.
As we move forward with redoing our zoning, what we found out is that we don't have zoning that adequately addresses some renewables. And what we saw happen in that area in East Concord is that not only didn't the zoning address it, but even when they went to the zoning board of adjustment for a special exemption, our zoning was so unclear that they had to table it, and they're looking for an opinion and a recommendation from city staff. So having this report and having city staff working with the committee, I think will move us in a direction that will answer all these questions and will ensure that we could move forward in a manner that protects our community and at the same time protects the rights and the character of the community that as we know it now. So if you have any comments on that, I'd appreciate.
You can just say yes.
Yes, I think is the comment.
Good answer. Thank you, Your Honor. I have to say I agree with some